Hi, I'm Chris Davis. I'd like to give you a look at my Open AC1. What is the Open AC1? Well, it's a reimagining of the Apple I. You can see it right here. It has a genuine 6502 processor, a 681 Motorola peripheral interface adapter. It has a 32K RAM chip and an 8K ROM chip. And it also has, as you can see, an Arduino Nano, and down in the lower right is a PIC32 processor. Now the PIC32 controls the VGA output and the USB keyboard input. The PIA and the 6502 and the RAM and the ROM do exactly what you would expect. The Arduino basically marshals the data between the peripheral interface adapter and the PIC32 microprocessor. The Arduino Nano also can read from an SD card, so as you'll see, we can load programs from an SD card, which of course the original Apple I could never do. You're probably aware that nowadays you can buy a circuit board on eBay. You can find all the parts and you can assemble your own realistic Apple I replica. I will tell you though, it's kind of expensive. You're going to spend, I'm going to guess, around $1,000 to get this put together. You're going to spend a lot of time troubleshooting. It is nice. I enjoy having it. It's fun to use, but it is really 1976 technology, and there's a reason. It's the Apple Computer 1, and the Apple II followed shortly after, because even while Woz was creating the Apple Computer 1, he knew that the Apple II would be a much better computer, which it was. But the Apple I still has a place well deserved in history. So let me show you what I've made here. Like I said, it's a reimagining of the Apple I, not a replica. So I've got it hooked up to my 8-inch VGA monitor that I got on Amazon. I have a mechanical wired keyboard here that I think I got this one from Micro Center. It was about $35. I'm going to plug a 9-volt power adapter, the same kind as you would use for any Arduino. I'm going to plug that in there, and we're going to see the monitor warm up here, and there we go. There's our cursor. Let me zoom in on that for you. There's our cursor. The Apple I had the @ sign. I think it's called an aspirand. That was the cursor that Steve Wozniak chose for the Apple I. Now we're in Wozmon, which is what the original Apple I dropped you into. In fact, in the original Apple I, that's all that was available, was the Wozmon. There was no Apple Basic in ROM, unlike my kit here. But with the Wozmon, you could type in memory locations, and you can find out what's in those memory locations. So if we do 0.ff, we're going to get the first 256 memory locations there. Now, as I pointed out, there is a ROM in this, and in that ROM is not just the Wozmon, but if I go to E000 and R for run, it's going to drop us into Apple Basic, the original BASIC that Steve Wozniak wrote. You might be tempted to call it Integer Basic. It is very similar to Integer Basic on the Apple II, but it's actually called Apple Basic. We type list, we'll get nothing because there is nothing in the memory right now. So let's say you want to show this off to your friends. You could either type in an entire BASIC program, or you could key in an entire machine language program. Your friends would be asleep long before you ever had anything running, unless it was just a simple Hello World program. Well, as you can see, I've added an SD card on here, and the reason I did that was because I wanted to be able to load applications quickly. Now, of course, the Apple I did not have an SD card. The closest you could get an Apple I was the ACI, the Apple cassette interface. This is for my Apple I kit that I showed you earlier. There is no expansion card on this. There's no way to plug this in. I do have some pins here where if you want to develop one, please feel free to do so. But instead, I'm using the SD card. Now, I've borrowed a few commands from the Apple II. For example, if I type catalog and hit enter, you're going to see it's going to give me a list of the applications that are on this SD card. And you'll see, if you look closely, you'll see some end with .bas, some end with .bin. Of course, you could probably figure that out, basic and binary. So we can load either one of those. I'm going to press the key to get the rest of this. I'll load a very simple program because even, the cassette interface for the Apple I was very slow, while loading from the SD card is actually slow too. So here's another that load was not a command on the original Apple I, but I've added it to this project. So I'm going to load 23 match .bas. Now I'm already in BASIC, but you're going to see when I hit enter, it's going to issue the E00R command, just in case you're not in BASIC. And as you can see, if we are in BASIC, it'll just give a harmless syntax error. And then it'll go on loading each line. It's just basically reading a text file from the SD card. In fact, you can insert this SD card in your laptop, and you can see the text files in it. And that's a great way to add more applications to this. So it's almost done loading the program here. Okay, it's done. We can type run, and there we go. This is from Creative Computing, entered in out of a book. How many matches? You know what? It's not a very smart program. I can beat it every time. I think I enter 3332, 333. 11 matches are remaining. You don't want to take the last match. I entered 2. Oh, no. You know what? I think I wanted another 3 there. Oh, he beat me because I wasn't paying attention. Okay, I got beaten by the computer, and he rightfully so called me a loser. So there we go. That's the applications on here. Some of them are quite a bit longer. We do have a version of Forth on here. I have personally never used Forth. I don't know how. I could probably look it up. Did have a fellow just tell me a few days ago he loves using Forth on here. That's a pretty long thing to load. There's also an enhanced version of BASIC you can load. A couple versions of Star Trek. I would, love to see what else people dig up off of the internet to put on here. So here it is. This is my Open AC1, Open Apple Computer 1. My goal is to build through-hole kits because I love kit building. Unfortunately, I have yet been able to find a dependable supplier for 6502 and 6821. So right now, all I have are a couple dozen kits that I've built in my testing process, and they all work great. Hopefully soon to have it available as a kit, but for right now you can buy it as an assembled and tested unit. So if you're interested, take a look at the link and check it out. Oh, by the way, I would like to thank, this is actually several open source projects that I've put together. I would really like to thank Tor Erik Baki-Lundy. He published a GitHub article, oh my goodness, 5 years ago, for his Apple I kit, which connected to a terminal emulator on your laptop. And that's where most of this came from. About the time I found his GitHub article, I was reading Tim Owed's book, Back to the Garage, Recreating the Apple I. Fascinating book. He walked through how the Apple I operated, how Vince Briel made his Apple I emulator about 20 years ago, and it was fascinating. And so at the same time, I found the project from Tor Erik Baki-Lundy. I combined his project with a VT100 terminal project from Jeff Graham. That takes care of the VGA output. Basically, I modified his program to use the Apple, well, an approximation of the Apple I font, and a few more things I added to his application. Also, David Hansel added a USB keyboard to that PIC32 application from Jeff Graham, so I'm using that as well. One thing I will tell you, it does need to use a hardwired USB keyboard, because the USB protocols for a wireless keyboard are very much different than for a wired keyboard, and David decided he was only going to support the wired USB protocol because, well, there wasn't a lot of memory left on the PIC32. I do have a link in the manual for this to my web page that discusses, you know, specific keyboards that will work, but really any standard wired USB keyboard without a lot of frills, because quite often when they add a lot of frills, that means the keyboard has a USB hub built into it, which then will not work with my project here. So get a standard wired USB keyboard. This one I picked up at Micro Center. I think it was about $35. I also have a keyboard I literally bought for $2.99 at Micro Center that works perfect with this. So you will need a bare bones USB keyboard, and any USB monitor will work with this. So there we go. There's my open AC1. I hope you enjoyed it.